'Tis the season, and we've got some thank you notes to write, so let's make some cards. I'm using some watercolors. You could use a basic palette like this, or you could use a palette where you mix your own. I also am going to be using some acrylic paint, a variety of brushes, some salt, and some oil pastels. There's a secret ingredient I'll be using later as well. But let's talk about paper. For my watercolor cards, I'm using a pad that measures 12 inches by 18 inches. I get out my scissors and cut it twice vertically and twice horizontally, which gives me 9 cards. I'm making a whole batch, so I did that twice. I'm also going to use a corner rounder. This is totally optional, but I think that the look is just a little bit more finished. I start by putting down some scrap paper on my work surface so I don't make too much of a mess. And a paper towel is helpful for cleaning my brush. You really could do anything you want. I'm starting by making a few simple shapes. Bear in mind, I'm going to be using a lot of layers on these cards, so these are just the base layers that I'm starting as the foundation right now. A little bit of salt. When that dries, that's going to create a nice snowflakey effect, which is what I'm going for. I like the contrast of the two different colors. I revisited these simple triangular shapes. Again, a little bit of contrast. A little bit of water in between these two layers allows them to mix together, and then the salt is going to pull the water out and create these little puddle effects. I experimented a bit with mark making and wasn't sure initially how this was going to look, but I just kept playing. A lot of different marks, some simple shapes, remembering all along that these are the base layers. I intend to add many more layers on top of this once they dry. I struggle sometimes with knowing when to stop, but it's okay. It's just watercolors. It's supposed to be fun, and the people who get the cards are going to know that this was made by hand, which is really special. Having that piece of scrap paper underneath allows me to make a little bit of a mess and go off the edges. When it dries, you can rub the salt off and you can see that it creates these little pools of color. Now comes my secret weapon, a potato. I'm going to make 2 potato stamps, carving out some simple snowflake shapes. And then in this one, I wasn't sure what to do, so I just carved out some lines to create this cool crisscross effect. I wasn't sure how it was going to look, so I pressed it on my scrap paper to see. I started with the snowflake, and I chose a color that was going to give me some contrast against this very pale minty green. I just kept telling myself all along that this was one of many layers I intended to add to keep it simple, add some contrast, add some interest. Whoopsie! Now I'm using some acrylic paint that has a bit of a shimmer. I wanted these cards to seem wintry, like a little snowstorm. I'm going to try using some oil pastel, which the watercolor will resist when I go on top. Took some experimenting to find how much, how little to use. The watercolor dries relatively quickly, and since I was doing a couple dozen cards at once, I was able to experiment with different shapes. Adding some more acrylic paint for some shimmer contrast. I recommend using a separate brush for acrylic paint and watercolor paint and not mixing the two. I love how these potato stamps are adding a depth to the watercolor. Adding some more shimmer to these snowy cards. I splattered a bit of white gouache on top for yet another snowy effect just by tapping the brush. Wasn't really a big fan of this pink card while I was working on it, but it grew on me over time. I loved it. And here's all the finished cards. Thanks for watching.